The Harbor Lights restaurant was usually a peaceful place, the kind of warm Brooklyn spot where couples came to celebrate birthdays and old men nursed coffee refills for hours. But tonight, the air changed the moment the door slammed open. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air. Chairs stopped squeaking. It felt like the whole room was holding its breath. Dominic Russo had arrived. People in New York whispered his name like a warning. Some called him a businessman. Others knew better. But it wasn't Dominic who froze the restaurant. It was the creature walking beside him, his pit bull, Titan, massive, steel gray, with scars across its shoulders like someone had carved violence into its skin. Titan wasn't on a leash. Dominic didn't believe in them. The hostess stepped back, trembling. A waiter dropped an entire tray of glasses, the crash echoing like gunshots. No one dared approach the infamous Mafia boss or his uncontrollable dog. Titan's low growl vibrated through the floor, making a baby cry at the corner booth. Grace Dalton, the young waitress wiping down table 7, didn't look up at first. She was exhausted 3 shifts back to back, rent overdue, and a call from Ellie's doctor still ringing in her ears. But when Titan's growl deepened, she finally turned, and her heart nearly stopped. The dog's eyes were locked on her, pupils sharp, body stiffening like he'd found a target. Grace froze. She had been terrified of big dogs ever since the accident years ago. Her palms went cold. Her breath hitched. Everyone backed away from Titan. Everyone. Except her, because her legs wouldn't move. Then Titan lunged, and Grace did something no one in that restaurant could have predicted. Grace Dalton had never asked the world for much. At 25, she lived the kind of life people walked past every day, without noticing a life stitched together with double shifts, overdue bills, and a courage no one ever saw. While other women her age posted travel photos and unwrapped Amazon packages, Grace counted quarters to buy Ellie's medication and prayed the landlord wouldn't raise rent again. Every morning she woke before sunrise in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Red Hook, listening to Ellie's soft breathing to make sure her heart wasn't struggling. Every night she returned home smelling of dish soap and coffee, hoping today wasn't the day her sister's doctor called with bad news. Grace had dreams, once big ones. She wanted to study veterinary medicine, wanted to work with animals, wanted a life where she wasn't terrified of everything larger than herself. But the accident changed everything. She was 8, the dog was huge, and the scars on her right leg still burned when rain came in heavy. From that day on, just the sound of claws on tile made her break into a cold sweat. But Ellie always said Grace had a gift. "Animals trust you," her sister would whisper, "even when people don't." Grace brushed the compliment away, though part of her wanted desperately to believe it. She couldn't afford hope, not when hospital bills arrived like clockwork, and the surgery Ellie needed kept slipping further out of reach. That night at Harbor Lights, Grace should have gone home early. She had a fever creeping behind her eyes, her knees ached, and her manager had chewed her out for being too slow. But she stayed. She always stayed. Quitting wasn't an option when Ellie depended on her. Customers saw only her calm smile, the soft voice, the tidy hair pulled into a low bun. They didn't see the fear, the fatigue, the girl who sometimes cried quietly in the supply closet so Ellie wouldn't hear her breaking. Grace Dalton was nobody in this city. At least, she had been nobody until Titan fixed his gaze on her, and the entire restaurant waited to see if she would live. And that was the moment her ordinary life began to unravel. Most people in Brooklyn only saw the Harbor Lights restaurant from the outside, a warm glow against the river, a view of Manhattan that looked almost unreal at night. But inside, it was a different world. The kind of world where rich men made quiet deals, where diamond bracelets flashed under candlelight, and where the skyline framed every table like a living painting. Grace never quite fit into that world, but she had learned to move through it like a shadow, balancing plates between the soft hum of expensive conversations. The restaurant's owner liked to pretend it was casual fine dining, but the details told the truth. Crisp white tablecloths, imported wine glasses that cost more than Grace's weekly paycheck, the soft scent of truffle butter swirling through the air. Chrome fixtures polished so perfectly they mirrored the Manhattan Bridge. On weekends, customers arrived in black SUVs and stepped out wearing Rolexes and tailored coats, as if they were stepping onto a stage instead of into a restaurant. Even the pianist in the corner played with the kind of elegance that belonged in a Fifth Avenue ballroom, not a Brooklyn waterfront. Grace always felt like an outsider here. She wore second-hand shoes while pouring wine for people who booked vacations on a whim. She saved tips in a jar while serving couples wearing Cartier bracelets that sparkled under the amber ceiling lights. She had memorized the menu descriptions, the wine pairings, the correct way to fold a napkin for a billionaire's table. But none of it ever felt like her world. It was just survival. Tonight, however, the luxury felt sharper, almost hostile. The chandelier's glow seemed colder. The river looked darker. Even the skyline felt distant, like it was watching what was about to happen. When Dominic, Russo, and Titan walked in, the room shifted into a different kind of tension. Wealth became a background detail. Fear became the centerpiece. Grace sensed it instantly, the way powerful men carried storms with them. And as Titan's growl echoed through the restaurant, Grace felt something else. This world of luxury was about to swallow her whole. She just didn't know how deep it would pull her in. Dominic Russo didn't need to raise his voice to make a room obey him. The way he stood, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders relaxed, eyes half-lidded, was enough to make grown men sit up straighter. But the real threat wasn't Dominic tonight. It was the man who walked in behind him, Marco Russo. Slightly younger, sharper jaw, colder eyes. His suit was immaculate, but something in his stance felt wild, unpredictable, like a match thrown near gasoline. If Dominic was the storm, Marco was the lightning that hit without warning. Several customers recognized him and quietly shifted their chairs back, instinctively creating distance. Grace noticed the way Marco scanned the room, as if measuring weaknesses. His eyes lingered on the bartender, then on the hostess, then finally on her. A slow, unsettling smile crawled across his face. Grace didn't know who he was yet, but something in her gut tightened. Ellie once told her, "Some people don't look at you, they look through you." Marco looked through her like she was already a pawn he could move. Dominic told Titan to sit. The dog obeyed for a moment, muscles coiled with tension. But when a server accidentally brushed against Dominic's table, Titan snapped, teeth clashing inches from the man's arm. Customers gasped. The server stumbled backward, nearly dropping a tray. Dominic tightened his jaw. Marco laughed softly, shaking his head. "That dog's useless," Marco muttered. "You should have put him down years ago." Dominic didn't respond, but his eyes hardened. Grace felt the tension between the two men, thick, heavy, old. A family wound not yet healed. Then Marco stepped toward her table, sliding his hands casually into his pockets. "You must be the brave waitress," he said, voice smooth but laced with something poisonous. "The one Titan can't take his eyes off." Grace swallowed. "I'm just doing my job, sir." Marco murmured. "We'll see about that." "Darfin." Dominic glanced up sharply, catching the exchange. For the first time, Grace saw something flicker in his expression. Worry, maybe even fear, because Marco had just marked her, and the real conflict was only beginning. The restaurant had just returned to a shaky calm when Marco decided to stir chaos again. Grace had approached their table with trembling hands, holding a tray of sparkling water Dominic ordered. She kept her eyes low, willing her legs not to shake. Titan followed her movement, muscles tight, but strangely focused, almost protective. Marco leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass like he was bored with the world. "Careful now," he said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Wouldn't want you dropping that on us. People like you can't afford mistakes." Grace kept her voice steady. "Your drink, sir," Dominic murmured. "Enough, Marco." But Marco only smirked. He reached out suddenly and flicked the bottom of Grace's tray with 2 fingers, swift, deliberate, cruel. The entire tray tilted. 3 crystal glasses crashed to the floor, water splashing across the polished hardwood like shattered ice. A woman at a nearby table gasped. A man muttered, "Jesus Christ." Grace froze in horror as the room erupted with whispers. "Oh, look," Marco said, feigning disappointment. "I was right." Grace felt heat crawl up her neck. Her paycheck couldn't cover those glasses. She knelt quickly, trying to gather the shards before anyone stepped on them. Her vision blurred. She could already hear her manager yelling. See the deduction on her next check. Feel Ellie's medical bills stacking higher. Marco crouched beside her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Accidents have consequences, sweetheart, especially when you're in the wrong place. Before Grace could respond, he brushed a shard toward her hand. A sharp sting cut across her finger. Blood appeared instantly. She winced, inhaling sharply. Dominic shot to his feet. Marco! The room froze again. Dominic's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Sit down, he said, jaw tight. Marco stood slowly instead. What? I didn't touch her. She's clumsy, that's all. Grace kept pressure on her bleeding finger, heart pounding. Titan, sensing her pain, began to growl deep, angry, dangerous. Customers backed away from the table as the tension thickened like fog. Dominic's eyes never left Marco, and Grace realized something in that moment. She had just become the center of a war she didn't understand. Then Titan lunged not at Grace, but at someone no one expected. Titan's sudden lunge wasn't toward Grace at all, it was toward Marco. The pit bull surged forward with a ferocious bark, teeth bared, muscles rippling. Chairs scraped backward. Customers screamed. Dominic caught Titan's collar just in time, pulling the animal back with a force that made veins rise in his arms. Titan snarled, eyes locked on Marco like he'd been waiting years for this moment. Marco stumbled backward, face blanching for a flicker before twisting into a scowl. You've lost control of him, he hissed. One day he'll rip someone's throat out. But Dominic wasn't listening. He was staring at Grace at her cut finger, at the blood dripping onto the tile. Something cracked in his expression, something cold and furious. He turned to her, voice low. Let me see. Grace shook her head. I'm fine. You're bleeding, Dominic said, softer than she expected. She pulled her hand away instinctively. She didn't want pity. She didn't want anyone, especially a man like him, to see how shaken she was. It's nothing. I'll clean it up, Marco scoffed loudly. Please, she's milking it, Grace snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the humiliation. Maybe it was the way Marco said she, like she wasn't a person at all. But something inside her rose up, something she didn't know she still had. Grace stood. Her voice didn't shake. Sir, you flicked the tray on purpose. You wanted this to happen. The restaurant fell silent. Marco blinked, stunned that she dared speak. Grace continued, her tone steady but edged with fire. If you have a problem, say it to my face. Don't hide behind broken glasses and cheap tricks. With cold, several customers nodded subtly. Even the pianist stopped pretending to play. Dominic looked at her differently now, not with curiosity, but respect. Marco's face darkened. You don't know who you're talking to. Maybe not, Grace said. But I know you're a grown man who bullied a waitress for fun. The words hung in the air like a slap. Marco stepped forward, fury twisting his features. Dominic's hand moved instantly to block him, and that was when Grace felt the shift in the room. The danger thickening around her like smoke. Because Marco wasn't done with her. Not even close. The manager finally rushed out from the kitchen, alerted by the shattered glass and terrified murmurs spreading like wildfire. His eyes darted from Dominic to Marco to Titan, then landed on Grace standing tall, breathing hard, blood still trickling down her fingertip. She looked small next to the Russo cousins, but in that moment, she was the only one in the room holding any dignity. Grace, the manager snapped. My office. Now. She opened her mouth to explain, but Marco cut in with a slick smile. She caused a scene, nearly got someone hurt. That's not what happened, Grace said firmly, but the manager wouldn't look at her. He was staring at Dominic instead, silently begging the man for mercy. Customers filming with their phones had already tucked them away, too afraid of what they might have captured. Dominic exhaled slowly, as if this night had taken a toll he didn't show often. Then he walked toward Grace. Come with me, he said quietly. Not a demand, not a threat. Something else. Grace hesitated. Every instinct screamed to run in the opposite direction, but her manager's glare made it clear if she didn't leave with Dominic, she'd still lose her job. If she did, She might lose much more. Marco watched the moment with razor-sharp delight. "Yeah, Gracie," he murmured. "Go on. Follow him. See where it leads." Grace ignored him. She followed Dominic out of the dining room, Titan trotting beside them with a strange new calm, as if the dog understood she was under his protection now. Outside, the cold river wind wrapped around them. Dominic turned to her. "You didn't deserve that," he said. "Any of it." Grace swallowed hard. "I don't want trouble. I can't afford it." "I know," Dominic replied, "which is why I need to talk to you. Privately." Her pulse kicked. "Why?" "Because Titan listens to you," he said. "And I need to know why." Grace froze on the sidewalk, the city lights spinning around her. Behind them, in the restaurant window, Marco watched with a smile that promised nothing good. Grace didn't know why she agreed to follow Dominic into the black SUV waiting at the curb. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way Titan kept glancing back at her, as if making sure she didn't disappear. The leather interior smelled faintly of cedar and something sharper power. Maybe. Dominic sat across from her, elbows on his knees, studying her with unreadable eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, noticing her stiff posture. Grace nodded but didn't relax. "Why am I here?" Dominic reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small photo. A younger Titan, limping, one ear stitched after what looked like a fight. Grace frowned. "What happened to him?" "He saved my life," Dominic said simply. "And he's never been the same since." She listened carefully. For the first time, Dominic didn't sound like a man people whispered about in fear. He sounded tired. "When he gets triggered," Dominic continued, "not even my men can get close. They want me to put him down. I won't." Grace swallowed. She knew what it felt like to cling to the only thing that made you feel safe. "But tonight," Dominic said. "He calmed down the moment you touched him. That doesn't happen with anyone." Grace looked away. "I didn't do anything special." "You did something," Dominic insisted, "and I need to understand it." Before she could respond, the SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a sleek building on Fifth Avenue. Marble pillars, security cameras, a private elevator that required a fingerprint scan. Everything screamed wealth and danger woven together. Dominic led her into the elevator. Titan followed, brushing against Grace's leg with surprising gentleness. As they rose, the city lights stretched beneath them like a glittering map of choices she never asked for. When the elevator opened, she stepped into a penthouse larger than her entire apartment building, floor-to-ceiling windows. A skyline so close she felt she could touch it. A grand piano sat near the window, untouched but polished. The space was beautiful, but cold like a museum built for a man who didn't sleep. Dominic turned to her. "I want you to try something," he said quietly. "Sit with Titan. See if he responds to you again." Grace's breath caught, because Titan was already staring at her, waiting, watching, as if he knew a truth she didn't. Grace sat on the edge of the leather sofa, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Titan approached slowly, paws silent against the polished floors. For a terrifying second, she saw the image from her childhood teeth flashing, the blur of fur, the scream that tore through 8-year-old Grace. Her leg throbbed as if the scar remembered better than her mind did. Dominic stood a few feet away, arms crossed but gaze gentle. "He won't hurt you," he said quietly. "Not with you." Grace wished she believed that. Titan stopped in front of her and lowered his massive head, sniffing her injured finger. His warm breath tingled against her skin. Grace froze, barely breathing. Titan's ears twitched, and then astonishingly, he nudged her hand with his nose, as if asking for permission. She slowly lifted her trembling fingers and touched the top of his head. Titan exhaled, long and soft, and leaned into her palm. Dominic let out a breath he'd been holding. "You see? He trusts you." There was something like wonder in his voice, something fragile beneath the steel exterior. Grace stroked Titan again, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his fur. The fear inside her loosened, just a little. "He's not what people think," she murmured. "Neither am I," Dominic replied quietly. Their eyes met. Grace looked away first. She didn't want to feel safe here. She didn't want to feel anything. But Titan had settled beside her, resting his head on her knee as if he'd known her forever. It was wrong. It was impossible. And yet it felt real in a way that scared her more than the dog did. Dominic stepped closer, studying her face. "Tell me something, Grace," he said. "Has anything like this ever happened before? With any animal?" She shook her head. "Never." "Then there's a reason," he said. "Something you're not telling me." Grace stiffened. "I don't have secrets. It's—" Dominic's voice softened. "Everyone has secrets." Before she could reply, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting Ellie. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. Then she opened the message and felt the blood drain from her face. The text message glowed on Grace's phone screen like a strike of lightning in a dark room. "Pretty brave tonight, waitress. Careful what you touch. Accidents happen." No signature. No clue. Just a photo attached, one taken outside harbor lights. Her bent beside the broken glass. Marco, arms crossed, smiling at her humiliation. The timestamp was only minutes earlier. Grace's breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles went pale. Dominic noticed instantly. "Grace," he said, stepping closer. "What is it?" She didn't want to show him. Didn't want to drag herself deeper into the shadows surrounding the Russo family. But fear cracked her voice. "Someone took this," she whispered. Dominic's jaw clenched. His eyes sharpened in a way that made the room feel colder. "Let me see." She hesitated, then handed him the phone. He studied the message for a long moment, breathing slow and steady like a man fighting an instinct he couldn't unleash. Titan lifted his head from her lap, sensing the tension, pressing closer to her leg protectively. Dominic finally spoke. "Marco sent this." Grace felt her stomach twist. "Why?" Dominic didn't answer right away. He paced toward the window, staring out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. "Because he enjoys fear," he said quietly. "And because you embarrassed him." Grace swallowed. "I didn't mean to." "Bullies don't need a reason," Dominic murmured. "They just need a target." She felt suddenly small in the massive penthouse, like the city itself was tilting under her feet. "I need to go home," she whispered. "Ellie's waiting." "Yes." Dominic turned, his expression shifting from anger to worry. "I'll have my driver take you." "No," Grace said quickly. I don't want to make anything worse." Dominic's voice softened. "Grace, listen. If Marco is watching you, I'll be fine," she insisted, though her hands shook. The elevator dinged softly, as if agreeing to take her back to the life she knew. Grace stood, Titan brushing against her leg as if reluctant to let her leave. Dominic stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If anything strange happens, call me." Grace nodded weakly, but as she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Another message. A new photo. This time it wasn't of her. It was of Ellie standing alone outside their apartment, and the caption read, "Next time." The elevator doors hadn't even closed when Grace broke into a run. She didn't wait for Dominic's driver. Didn't wait for anything. She burst out onto the street, breath fogging the cold night air, her pulse pounding against her ribs so violently she felt dizzy. All she could picture was Ellie standing alone outside their building, unaware of the danger curling around them like smoke. Grace ran to the subway entrance, swiping her Metro card with shaking hands. The turnstile nearly caught her hip as she pushed through. She sprinted down the stairs, lungs burning, ignoring the bewildered stares of passengers. When the train screeched into the station, she shoved herself inside, grabbing a pole with numb fingers. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't want to look, but she did. A second photo. Ellie again, but this time zoomed in. The collar of her jacket, the small heart-shaped charm on her backpack. The camera had been close. Too close. Grace's knees nearly buckled. She bit down on a sob, gripping the pole tighter. "Please, Ellie, be inside," she whispered. The train crawled through tunnels like it was moving through molasses. Each passing station felt like a year. When she finally reached Red Hook, she bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the sharp sting in her leg where her old scar throbbed. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Her apartment building came into view, a rundown brick block with flickering lights and chipped steps. Grace pushed through the front door and fumbled with her keys. "Ellie?" she called, voice cracking. Silence. She rushed inside. The living room light was on. Her sister's backpack was lying on the couch. Grace's chest tightened. "Ellie," a soft voice answered from the bedroom. "Grace? What's wrong?" Grace burst through the door and saw Ellie sitting cross-legged on the floor, headphones on, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding outside. Grace dropped to her knees and pulled her sister into a fierce hug. Relief flooded her body so quickly it made her tremble. But before she could explain anything, a shadow moved across the hallway window. Grace froze. Someone was outside, and when she turned toward the glass, a face was staring right back at her. Grace froze, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The face outside the window wasn't distorted by imagination or shadow. It was real, pale from the dim hallway light, sharp eyes, a smirk that didn't belong anywhere near a home. The man didn't flinch when Grace saw him. Instead, he tapped the glass once with his knuckles, slow, deliberate, like he wanted to make sure she remembered the sound. "Grace?" Ellie whispered. Grace pulled her sister behind her instinctively. "Stay here. Don't move." She stepped toward the window, and the man stepped back just enough to blur into the dim corridor. Grace yanked the curtains closed and locked the window with trembling fingers. Her stomach twisted. Whoever he was, he had been waiting, watching. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. "You run fast." Cute. Grace felt her lungs tighten. She couldn't hide this anymore. She called the only person who would understand the weight behind a threat like this. "Dominic." He picked up on the first ring. "Grace?" Her voice cracked softly. "Someone followed me home." A pause. Short. Sharp. "Is Ellie safe?" "She's inside with me." "I'm coming," Dominic said. "Don't open your door for anyone except me." Before she could respond, someone knocked. 3 slow taps. Not loud. Not urgent. But mocking. Grace grabbed Ellie's wrist and backed both of them into the bedroom. She locked the door, praying the thin wood would hold. Outside, the apartment stayed eerily quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the soft hum of the refrigerator, too normal for the terror curling through her chest. Ellie whispered, "Grace, what's happening?" Grace didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to scare her sister, but she couldn't lie either. "Someone's trying to intimidate us," she said gently. "But Dominic is coming." Ellie nodded, eyes wide. Minutes stretched like hours. Then headlights flashed across the wall brighter, stronger. A car pulled up fast. Doors slammed. Heavy footsteps hit the hallway floor. Grace held her breath. A deep voice called from outside the apartment. "Grace, open the door. It's me." She exhaled in relief and unlocked it. But when the door swung open, it wasn't Dominic standing there. Grace's breath caught in her throat as the door swung open. Instead of Dominic, a tall woman in a dark coat filled the doorway, sharp eyes, purposeful stance, badge clipped discreetly to her belt. Detective Laurel Hart. Grace recognized her instantly. She'd seen the detective at Harbor Lights earlier in the week, asking quiet questions and watching Dominic from the shadows. "Grace Dalton?" Laurel asked, stepping inside before Grace could respond. "We need to talk." Grace's pulse jumped. "Now's not a good time." Laurel held up a hand. "I know someone's been here, and I know you ran home terrified. So yes, now is exactly the time." Ellie peeked from behind Grace, and Laurel softened just slightly. "You're safe," she assured the girl. "I'm here to help." Grace wasn't convinced. "How do you even know where I live?" Laurel gave her a level look. "You've been connected to Dominic twice in 24 hours. That puts you in the middle of something bigger than you realize. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to keep you alive." Grace's voice trembled. "A man was outside our window." Laurel nodded. "I know. I saw him leaving the building when I arrived. I followed him here from uptown." Grace stared at her. "You followed him? Why?" "Because he's one of Marco Russo's men," Laurel said. "And Marco doesn't intimidate people for fun. He does it when he wants them scared enough to make mistakes." Ellie clutched Grace's arm. "Grace, I don't like this." "Is there?" Laurel crouched slightly, eye level with Ellie. "I won't let anything happen to you, either of you." Just then, footsteps thundered up the hallway stairs. Heavy, fast, determined. Laurel stood instantly, hand near her holster. "Get behind me." Grace obeyed, pulling Ellie tight against her side. The footsteps stopped right outside the apartment. Laurel called, "Identify yourself." A deep voice answered, irritated and breathless. "Move aside, detective." "They're with me." "Dominic." Laurel narrowed her eyes. "You're late. I got here as fast as I could." Grace exhaled in relief until she noticed something on Dominic's sleeve, a smear of dirt, and something that looked very much like blood. Dominic met her gaze and said quietly, "Grace, you need to hear what just happened." Dominic stepped into the apartment, eyes darting to Ellie before settling on Grace. He looked different, tense, distracted, as if he'd sprinted through half the city. His sleeve was streaked with dirt, and the faint smear of something darker clung near his cuff. Grace's stomach twisted. "Dominic," Laurel said sharply, blocking his path. "Start talking." He ignored her authority and faced Grace directly. "One of Marco's men was following you." I confronted him. Laurel scoffed. Confronted? Or something more? Dominic shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. "He ran. I chased him. Lost him in the alleys near Pier 31. He paused, then added, "But I found something he dropped." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small piece of fabric blue with a tiny embroidered heart. Ellie gasped. "That's my backpack charm." Grace felt her knees weaken. "Where did you find this?" Dominic's voice lowered. "On the ground, near a loading dock." "He's been close to your building for a while." Grace stared at the charm, trembling. "Why us? Why my sister?" Laurel answered before Dominic could. "Marco doesn't like losing control. Tonight, you embarrassed him in public. Men like him don't forgive that." Dominic's jaw tensed. Marco crossed a line. Grace looked between them, overwhelmed. "What do I do now? I can't protect Ellie alone." Dominic stepped forward, not threatening, but firmly certain. "You're not alone." Laurel crossed her arms. "She's safer with law enforcement," Dominic countered. "She's safer with someone Marco actually fears." The room fell into a heavy silence. Grace felt pulled between two worlds, neither of which she trusted completely. Ellie clung to her sweater, small fingers trembling. Dominic softened his tone. "Grace, listen to me. Tonight wasn't random. Marco's escalating. If he's bold enough to follow your sister, he won't stop there." Grace whispered. "What does he want from me?" Dominic didn't blink. "Leverage. Damn. Laurel added. "Control." But Grace already knew. Deep down, the truth settled like ice in her chest. Marco wasn't just trying to scare her. He was preparing to take something that mattered most. The apartment felt colder after Dominic's warning. Every shadow sharper, every creak louder. Grace barely slept. She sat on the edge of Ellie's bed, watching her sister breathe peacefully, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Ellie didn't deserve any of this. She was supposed to worry about homework and music class, not men lurking outside their window. At dawn, Grace forced herself to get up. She needed to work. Bills didn't wait, and Ellie's next medical appointment was in 3 days. Laurel had insisted on placing a patrol car nearby, but Grace still checked the hallway twice before letting Ellie walk downstairs with her to catch the school bus. "Text me when you get there," Grace said, hugging her tightly. "I will," Ellie promised. "Don't worry so much, Grace. I'm tougher than I look. Ever." Just 9. Grace managed a smile, watching her sister board the bus. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. Almost. The day at Harbor Lights passed in a blur. Grace kept glancing at her phone, checking for Ellie's message. It finally buzzed at 8:12 a.m. "Made it. Love you." Grace exhaled for the first time since sunrise. But by afternoon, something felt wrong. Ellie always texted again during lunch. Always sent a funny picture or a heart emoji. But today, nothing. Grace texted her. "You good, kiddo?" No response. An hour passed. She texted again. "Ellie, please answer." Still nothing. Her hands began to shake. She asked her manager for a break, rushed to the alley behind the restaurant, and dialed her sister's number. Straight to voicemail. A cold dread seeped into her chest. She tried calling the school next. "Ellie Dalton," the secretary repeated. "Hold on, let me check." Grace waited, stomach twisting. Finally, the woman returned. She wasn't in her last 2 classes. We thought she had a medical appointment. Grace felt the world tilt. No, she didn't. She hung up and dialed Dominic instantly. He answered on the second ring. "Dominic, Ellie's missing." Silence. Heavy. Deadly. "Where are you?" he demanded. "At work." "Stay there. I'm coming." Grace's vision blurred as she pressed a hand to her mouth to stop herself from crying. Then her phone buzzed again. A new message. No words, just a video. A shaky clip of Ellie's backpack lying on a dirty warehouse floor, and a man's voice whispering, "Time to choose, Grace." Grace's hands shook so violently she almost dropped her phone. The video replayed in her mind Ellie's backpack on the filthy warehouse floor, the dim light flickering, that voice whispering like a threat wrapped in silk. She felt like the world had gone silent around her, like every sound had been pulled away, except the pounding of her own heartbeat. Within minutes, Dominic's SUV screeched to a stop behind harbor lights. He jumped out before the engine fully stopped, his expression carved from cold fury. "Get in," he said. Grace slid inside, breath uneven. "We have to find her. Please, Dominic. She's just a kid." "We will," he said, voice deep, steady, terrifyingly calm. "And whoever took her will answer for it." The SUV sped through Brooklyn's streets, weaving between traffic with sharp precision. Dominic was already calling his men, issuing orders in clipped tones Grace didn't fully understand. Titan, surprisingly quiet, sat between them, eyes focused forward, as if he sensed the urgency. Grace held the phone tight. "The warehouse in the video. Can you recognize it?" Dominic nodded. "Marco has several old properties along the docks. This looks like Pier 49. Grace swallowed. "Is he doing this because of me?" Dominic glanced at her, jaw tight. "Marco doesn't need a reason. Fear is his currency." The SUV turned toward the waterfront, the city lights fading as they entered the industrial district. Rusted containers, broken fences, and old cranes cast long shadows across the pavement. The place felt abandoned except for the faint echo of laughter drifting from somewhere deep inside. The SUV stopped. Dominic shut off the engine. "Stay behind me," he said. A metal door creaked somewhere nearby. Grace's breath caught. "Ellie." Dominic moved forward, Titan at his side, the dog's posture rigid and alert. Grace followed closely, every nerve on fire. They approached a row of warehouses, each more decayed than the last. One of them had a dim light seeping through the cracks in the boarded window. Dominic whispered, "This is it." Grace stepped toward the door, then froze. A scream echoed from inside. Ellie's scream. And the moment Grace reached for the handle, the door suddenly swung open from the inside. The metal door flew open, slamming against the wall with a force that made Grace flinch. Dominic reached out instinctively, pulling her behind him as Titan growled low and dangerous. A tall man stepped into the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the flickering light inside. It wasn't Marco, but one of his men, broad-shouldered, with a crooked nose and a nasty grin. Well, he sneered. "The waitress finally showed up. Marco said you would." Grace's breath hitched. "Where's my sister?" The man tilted his head toward the darkness behind him. "Inside. Safe for now. Depends on you." Dominic stepped forward, voice low with warning. "Move aside." "Oh, boss," the man chuckled. "Marco said you might try to play hero. Too late for that." Dominic didn't waste time. He lunged, grabbing the man by his collar and slamming him against the doorframe so hard dust rained down from the metal beams above. Titan barked fiercely, jumping forward, only stopping when Dominic commanded, "Stay." Grace slipped past Dominic before he could stop her. "Grace!" he barked, but she was already inside. The warehouse smelled of damp concrete and old machinery. Shadows stretched across the floor, broken only by a single hanging bulb swaying gently, throwing crooked circles of light. Grace's heart hammered as she scanned the space. "Ellie," she whispered. A small cry came from behind a stack of pallets. Grace sprinted toward the sound and found Ellie tied to a chair, eyes wide with fear but unharmed. Grace fell to her knees, pulling her sister into her arms the moment she managed to untie her. Ellie sobbed against her shoulder, and Grace felt her own tears spill uncontrollably. Footsteps echoed behind them. Dominic entered, dragging the unconscious guard. "We need to go. Now." But before they could move toward the exit, a slow clap echoed from the catwalk above. Grace froze. Dominic looked up sharply. Marco Russo stood there, leaning casually against the railing, eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "Touching reunion," he drawled. "Really warms the heart." Titan growled, hackles rising. Marco smiled. "But the real game," he said softly, "starts now." Marco's slow applause echoed through the warehouse like a taunt carved into steel. Grace tightened her hold on Ellie, pulling the girl behind her as she rose to her feet. Dominic stepped in front of both of them, his posture calm but coiled with danger. Titan stood beside him, muscles tight, growl vibrating through the concrete floor. "Marco," Dominic warned, voice low. "This ends tonight." Marco smirked. "Oh, it ends tonight, all right. But not the way you think." He leaned over the railing, eyes glinting with poisonous satisfaction. "Funny thing, Dominic, your little waitress has been asking all the wrong questions, so maybe it's time she got some answers." "Oh," Grace felt her chest tighten. "I don't want anything from you." Marco ignored her. "You ever wonder why a man like me took such an interest in you?" He let the words hang like smoke. Or why Ellie's face was so familiar. Grace stiffened. "Don't say her name." Marco chuckled. "Sensitive? You shouldn't be. She looks just like your father." Grace froze. "What?" Dominic shot Marco, a lethal glare. "Marco, stop." Marco raised a hand dramatically, savoring her confusion. "Your father, Grace Dalton. Sweet, loyal, hard-working. A good man, but unfortunately, a man who stood in the wrong place, at the wrong time." Grace shook her head. "You're lying." "Am I?" Marco said, leaning further over the railing. "The explosion that killed your parents wasn't an accident. It was a job gone wrong." "My job." The warehouse seemed to tilt. Grace's breath stopped in her throat, the floor swaying beneath her. No, that's not true." Dominic's voice cut through the air. "Grace, look at me." His tone was firm, grounding. "You don't owe him your fear." Marco laughed. "Oh, she will. Because she lost everything because of me, and she didn't even know my name." Ellie trembled behind Grace, whispering, "Grace, come back." Grace's vision blurred with tears. Rage and grief twisted together so tightly she could barely breathe. Dominic stepped forward, fury radiating from him like heat. "Marco, you just dug your own grave." Marco's smile turned razor-sharp. "Come, make me lie in it." And with that, he snapped his fingers, lights went out, and the warehouse plunged into darkness. Darkness swallowed the warehouse like a living creature. Grace grabbed Ellie's hand, pulling her close as the air filled with the scrape of footsteps and the low rumble of Titan's growl. Dominic's voice cut through the blackness, calm but edged with steel. "Don't move. Stay behind me." A metallic clang echoed somewhere above them. Then Marco's mocking voice drifted through the dark. "Scared yet, Dominic? Or is it just your little waitress trembling?" Grace clenched her jaw, refusing to give him the satisfaction. A single emergency light flickered on, casting a sickly yellow glow that barely cut through the shadows. It revealed Dominic standing in a wide defensive stance, Titan beside him, teeth bared. Grace and Ellie huddled behind a stack of crates, hearts pounding in sync. Marco stepped into the half-light on the catwalk, a metal pipe resting casually on his shoulder. "You always thought you were better than me," he taunted. "Smarter, stronger. But tonight, you lose." Dominic didn't flinch. "You kidnapped a child, Marco. No one wins after that." Marco laughed. "You think I care about winning? I care about making you suffer." He swung the pipe down, smashing a hanging light. Sparks flew. Titan lunged forward, barking furiously. Marco disappeared deeper into the shadows above. Then chaos erupted. A thud overhead, footsteps racing, the sound of metal hitting metal. Grace peeked out just in time to see Dominic leap onto the ladder, climbing after Marco with a speed that didn't seem human. Titan stayed below, pacing protectively in front of the sisters. Grace held Ellie tight as a violent crash shook the catwalk. Dominic and Marco collided, each blow sending vibrations through the metal beams. Marco fought with desperation, wild and reckless. Dominic fought with precision controlled, unforgiving. A final struggle, a desperate shove. Marco slipped. He grabbed the railing, dangling above the concrete floor. Grace gasped. Marco's eyes widened with panic as Dominic stared down at him. "Help me!" Marco choked. Dominic's expression didn't change. "You didn't help them," he said quietly. For a long second, time froze. Then Marco's grip faltered. He fell. A brutal thud echoed through the warehouse. Ellie whimpered. Grace covered her eyes. Dominic climbed down slowly, breathing hard. Titan ran to him, nudging his hand. Dominic looked at Grace. "It's over," he said softly. But Grace could feel it. Something even bigger was still waiting outside that warehouse. The police arrived minutes after the final echo faded inside the warehouse. Flashing lights painted the rusted walls blue and red as officers swept through the scene. Detective Laurel Hart strode in with purpose, her sharp eyes scanning the chaos before locking onto Grace and Ellie. "You're both safe," she said, steadying Grace with a hand on her shoulder. "It's over. Marco won't hurt anyone again." Grace nodded, but her legs felt weak. The weight of the night pressed on her fear, relief, exhaustion all tangled together. Ellie clung to her side, trembling but safe, alive. Grace kissed the top of her sister's head, tears finally spilling freely. Dominic stood a few feet away, Titan pressed against his leg. For once, he didn't look like the untouchable man people whispered about. He looked bruised, tired, human. When their eyes met, he walked toward her carefully, as if approaching something fragile. "You protected her," Grace whispered, voice breaking. "You protected us." Dominic shook his head. "You protected her. I just helped." He paused, breathing out slowly. "Grace, I'm sorry about your parents. What Marco did." "I know," she said softly. "And it wasn't you." He swallowed hard, relief flickering across his features. "I never wanted you pulled into this life." "Well," she said with a faint smile, "you didn't pull me. I walked in on my own." Ellie tugged Grace's sleeve. "Can Titan come visit us?" Grace almost laughed through her tears. Dominic did smile, small, real. "He'd like that," he said. "He listens to you." Laurel approached them. "Dominic Russo," she said, arms crossed. "You and I need to talk. And for once, not as enemies." Dominic nodded. "I'll cooperate." Laurel gave Grace a reassuring look before walking away. As dawn crept over the river, Dominic turned back to her. "If you ever want something more than fear and running, I'm here. No pressure, just choice." Grace looked at Ellie, then at Titan, gently nudging her hand, then back at Dominic. For the first time in years, her future didn't feel like a tightrope, it felt like a door opening. "Maybe," she said softly, "we can start with dinner." Dominic's smile deepened. "It would be an honor." Titan barked once, tail wagging, as if sealing the agreement. And for the first time, Grace let herself believe that life could finally be kind. Because this time, she wasn't standing alone. Well, that's the end of our story. And if you're still here with us right now, my friend, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it's Grace's courage, maybe it's Ellie's innocence, or maybe it's the reminder that even in the darkest rooms, one small act of kindness can change everything. The Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Marcus Aurelius wrote that challenges don't block the path, they are the path. And we saw that tonight, didn't we? Grace didn't choose fear, but she chose how to respond to it. She didn't choose danger, but she chose love. And that choice shaped her destiny. Life won't always be gentle, but we can choose to stay gentle within it. We can choose to protect what matters. We can choose to grow, even when it hurts. If this story reminded you of your own strength, if it made you feel something real, then let's stay connected. Give this video a like. Share it with someone who might need a little courage today. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep walking through these stories together. You're not alone here. We're in this together.